This video, and this series especially, that is Budget Gourmet, is brought to you by the good folks at KEH. Not only is KEH the oldest and biggest at what they do, buying and selling exclusively used camera gear of all sorts since 1979, but they do it well, with integrity and both a 180-day warranty and 21-day return policy, free shipping on transactions over $49. Which is why, because they make it as futz-free a process as possible, they are our go-to whenever we are looking to fund new purchases by selling our own gear or buying that special used piece of kit properly graded and checked when we want to go quirky or old school. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount or bonus code in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to welcome you to part 2 of our 3-part special Leica edition of Budget Gourmet. Now, in part 1, we explored buying used. That is, buying only Leica gear, nothing off-brand, but buying, right, used. In some instances, buying gear more than half a century old. Here in part 2, we're going to explore the buy different path to a budget Leica M experience. Now, when I say buy different, I'm keeping it simple. I mean saving money through the purchase of different brands. That is, cameras and lenses from companies other than Leica, but which are Leica M compatible without adapters. We will get to that in another video. The key to this approach, as with all 3 approaches, is what the Leica M experience is to you. We'll have one more episode after this in which we think differently. Now, it's important for you that I lay out my biases because my sense of a Leica M experience may not be yours, and sharing those biases with you up front should help you calibrate the utility of this episode for you. So, first, I am biased toward Leica rather than Leica compatible. This is because I have personal history with Leica, in particular, going back to my early childhood. Those of you who know me certainly know this. But this fascination with Leica has been further solidified as an adult through my study of the company itself, the legendary photographers who used Leicas, the iconic photographs they took with Leicas, a deeper dive into the larger context of humanity and history in which those images were taken and that company managed, and my time over the last few years in particular shooting with a lot of Leica M's and M glass. For me, there is simply no other camera and lens company on the planet whose history and impact compare to Leica's. If you aren't, for example, familiar with the story of the Leica train, I suggest you acquaint yourself with it. If you've never shot with the tiny jewel-like 4th or 5th generation Summicron M50 at, say, f5.6, you should. Second, I am biased toward, perhaps I should say more interested in, Leica camera bodies than I am in Leica lenses, a function most likely of my first childhood fascination with the mechanics and industrial design of my mother's 3A. The collapsible 5-centimeter Sumar attached to it was infinitely less interesting to me then. But things do change, and my preference for Leica-only bodies is about more than my personal history. It is also the case that in the earliest days today of 2022, the actual differences in optical performance between the merely very good and the very, very best lenses, I am not talking about lens character, but instead resolving power, edge-to-edge sharpness, chromatic aberration, flare ghosting, and focus breathing suppression, have diminished to the point of irrelevance for many of us due to the diffusion of computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing, and skilled labor pools across the globe. You do not have to pay beaucoup bucks for beaucoup performance. Well, at least as far as 99% of us are concerned, 99% of the time. Which is not to say that, in point of fact, long after I sold my own M8, I now find myself in the position of owning two Leica M lenses without a Leica M body to go with them. In large measure because used Leica M lens prices have been going up for years, as have classic Leica M film bodies, if not digital bodies. All of which is to say, to cut to the chase, that if we're talking about buying other brands while still having a Leica M experience, I think there is more to talk about lenses. So let's start there. Although, once again, while there are many choices, there are more than half a dozen third-party companies currently selling M-mount lenses, I'm going to concentrate on just a few of them. In fact, I'm going to recommend just a handful of them from only two companies, Voigtlander and TT Artisan. Although I do suggest that you take a close look at Zeiss ZM lenses across the board, with the sole caveat that I have never personally shot with any Zeiss ZM lens. I know, my bad. Why these three? Why not 7 Artisan or Kippon, Meyer Optic Gorlitz, Midicon Zhongyi, or Venus Optics? And what about Minolta Rollcars? And why am I giving Zeiss a pass? What is the basis? What are the parameters for my recommendations to you? Glad you asked. A. Familiarity. First, except for Zeiss, as I just said, I'm only including M-mount lenses I've had in hand and used. But I have used, tested, and owned a number of Zeiss autofocusing lenses. 2 out of the 3 I owned, I hold in very high regard. Zeiss has been around, certainly, long enough. The prices of their ZM lenses new compared to Leica M lenses new or used are significantly lower enough. And there is a sufficiently robust body of reviews. I recommend especially those by Sean Reed of Reed Reviews and my bud Ken Rockwell, both of whom have done detailed comparisons of the Zeiss lenses to their Leica counterparts, that it is easy enough for me to suggest you may well find a cost-effective Zeiss alternative to almost any Leica M lens if the trade-offs work for you. Of course, it is also the case that for years, Zeiss ZM lenses were the first port of call for people looking for Leica performance from non-Leica glass. We will come back to this. Second, I haven't had any lenses from any of those other much newer manufacturers in hand, save for the 9mm f5.6 Dreamer from Venus Optics, which, straight up, I thought was well-built, is well-built, and capable of beautiful color with a relatively unique rectilinear field of view, if not being the sharpest tool in the shed. But I have owned Voigtlander's Ultron 28 f2. I ended up selling it because I wasn't happy with its optical performance. I've shot with and enjoyed Voigtlander's 40mm f1.2, oddly enough. I have Voigtlander's 35 and 50 Apolanthers in-house at the moment for evaluation, and I am impressed. I've tested TT Artisan's 51.4 and found it to be surprisingly well-built and optically performant for peanuts, relatively speaking, and now I have their 28mm f5.6 in-house as well, although I do not like it as much. B. Relevance. I'm only including focal lengths and apertures that I consider canonical within the Leica ecosystem. These relatively new companies are a breath of fresh air because they offer something different, most often speed, sometimes macro capabilities, sometimes ultra-wide angles at incredibly low prices. Much lower than Zeiss ZM lenses, as in as low as 1/4 the price of a ZM lens, less than 1/10 the price of a new Leica lens sometimes. Yeah, a lot less than that. But if one is looking to find budget alternatives to classic Leica glass, well, Leica has no lens like the Dreamer 9mm f5.6, nor Venus Optics' very interesting 24mm f14 bug-eye macro, which, by the way, is not even available in Leica M mount and costs between $1,600 and $1,800, which is not chump change. On the other hand, TT Artisan's 51.4 is a clear, low-cost alternative not only to Leica's vaunted Summilux M51.4, but to a used Summicron M50 f2 I recommended in Part 1 as a budget gourmet pick, and a new or used Zeiss 50mm f2 planar. Put differently, if you want to experiment with fields of view or maximum apertures outside of the classic lineup that I shared with you in my first video in this series, I'll put a link to it in the show notes below, feel free. But this is beyond the boundary of relevance I've set for the series, which should not stop you from weighing in the comments section. As always, I look forward to what you, dear YouTube viewers, care to share about your own experiences. C. Viability. That is to say, freedom from worry that either the product or company might disappear, and with them, the ability to have those products repaired. One can argue that both Zeiss and Voigtlander are little more than brand names owned and or manufactured by Asian companies. Perhaps even the same one. I've heard this before. It may be the case with their M-mount lenses, but maybe not. But the net of it is that both products are well manufactured with significant market presence that are market proven. What about the Minolta Rocors? Well, there were only 3 of them made in M-mount, a 28, a 40, and a 90, a result of Minolta's partnership with Leica in the early 70s to co-develop the original Leica film CL and Minolta's version of it. Both came with a tiny 40 f2 designed by Minolta specifically for them. But the CL line had a limited run. Minolta later merged with Konica in 2003, and then what was left of their SLR business was spun out and acquired by Sony in 2006. I am unaware of a vibrant third-party repair industry for them. They've long since ceased production. Although, if you were willing to take the risk, and when you can find them used, especially that 40 f2, they're generally not much less expensive than a new Voigtlander 41.2, 35 or 50 Apo-Lanther f2. If any of you know differently or have another point of view, again, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. The Minolta Rocors fit my definition of non-viable. Once again with feeling, though, you may feel differently, and that's fine. What about Meyer Optic Gorlitz, another European brand with a long history, which, like Voigtlander, passed through the Zeiss orbit before eventually escaping that gravitational pull and making its own way? Meyer Optic Gorlitz's most recent incarnation as a brand, reborn by an investment firm, has been tarnished by an errant Kickstarter campaign and bankruptcy. For now, it seems to me to be a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me proposition, to which I cannot confer legitimacy. Can't recommend them. Medicon Zhongyi is something else. It is a Chinese company which began as a joint venture in 1984 that subsequently ended in 2004, but the company carried on after the joint venture partners went their separate ways. It makes lenses in a number of mounts that helps to make it viable, though as of now it only offers one lens actually available to purchase in M-mount, their Speedmaster 50 0.95, with a 90 1.5 currently available for pre-order. This is not, for me anyway, a sufficient track record of specific Leica M-compatible lenses well accepted in the market, and a rangefinder lens this fast, which to my way of thinking actually means that difficult to focus with precision, is simply not of interest to me. Nor are the heavy chromatic aberration and very soft image wide open consistently reported by other reviewers. But again, if you want to experiment with an $800 alternative to Leica's $13,000 50mm f/0.95 Noctilux, be my guest. Although I found that the size, image softness, and chromatic aberration wide open even of the Leica lens to be not to my taste, never mind budget. What about 7 Artisan? They are a relatively new arrival with some novel lenses like their 50, but as with the Medicon Speedmaster I just mentioned, I would not recommend, if I wasn't clear enough, either lens, as there is no high-speed 50 I'd recommend irrespective of brand because of image quality. And Kipon? They're so new that their online shop isn't even live yet, as of the time I'm recording this video at the end of December 2021, actually. Again, not enough of a track record, and I haven't gone hands-on with one for me to be in a position to recommend it. Of all the players whose lenses I haven't recommended among the players I've mentioned, I'd rate Venus Optics most highly. I think they are viable and they are interesting. It's just that one M-mount lens of theirs, which I tested, fell outside of the range of relevance for this series. D. Commitment and momentum. Do the companies and their products evince a sense that they are in it for the long haul and worthy of your vote with your money? This, I think, beyond the simple fact that I've not used Zeiss ZM lenses, is what, along with my personal experience, catalyzes my preference for Voigtlander lenses over Zeiss lenses, and pretty much every other brand I've mentioned today. Although Zeiss and Voigtlander have been the go-to third-party Leica M-mount brands for decades, each with its own rich history, at this point I think it's fair to say that it is Voigtlander which has continued to expand its offerings and innovate. While Zeiss offers 19 different ZM mount lenses for the M system that have found many fans, Today, Voigtlander offers 40 lenses across several distinct lines, with a number of new lenses introduced just over the past few years that are either very fast, like that 40 f1.2 Nocton, or very well corrected. They're 35 f2 and 50 f2 Apo Lanthars, and just recently announced 90 f2.8 Apo Scopar, and designed specifically for today's higher resolution digital sensors. It appears that Zeiss has been standing pat since the mid-2000s, at least when it comes to their M-mount glass, and with the diffusion, once again, of computer-aided design, manufacturing, and skilled labor pools globally, my own sense is that there are better values or better raw performance to be had from others. Thus, one has to acknowledge, I think, TT Artisan, alongside Voigtlander, for their commitment and momentum. I just came across TT Artisan's newest lens available for pre-order, for example, a 90mm f1.25. Now, this is not really the kind of lens that I would recommend for rangefinders, but I got to get my hands on one anyway. One more thought to hold for another video. And although I'm not in a position to recommend them, credit where credit is due. 7 Artisans offers more M-mount lenses than anyone other than Leica itself, Voigtlander, and Zeiss, including a 51.1 for all of $350. Finally, the one other reason I've chosen the lenses I have to recommend or encourage you to explore is because I can't find manufacturers' MTF charts for too many of these non-Leica lenses. Of course, one can argue that MTF charts between manufacturers are not apples to apples, or that MTF charts don't tell the whole story of a lens, and of course, I'd agree with you. However, what I've learned over the years is that MTF charts, irrespective of manufacturer, tend generally to comport well with what my eyes tell me, or alert me to something beyond sales puffery. And it's easy enough, once you understand it, to settle on common line pairs per millimeter to get a rough sense of things. This leads to the problem I have. As I've said multiple times already, my eyes tell me that the very latest lens designs, irrespective of where they are manufactured or by whom, are generally more performant in a clinical sense than most lenses designed just a decade or two ago, but I don't have readily available, relatively objective external data to make the case to myself that I am either right or wrong when I don't have the lenses in hands. Without that data, I'm unwilling to extrapolate to the point of recommending any lenses other than what I've used. The net of all of us is that I can only offer you a very limited number of recommendations for budget lens picks for third-party Leica M-compatible lenses, and actually, I've already mentioned them to you. But based on the word of other people I respect, I'd say do take a look at Zeiss's Biogon T 25 2.8 ZM, C Biogon 35 2.8, Planar 50 f2, and Voigtlander's 75mm 1.8 Heliar. Let's talk very briefly about non-Leica M mount bodies. I've already laid out my bias toward only actual Leica M bodies, and in part 1, I laid out my bias for digital Ms, flying in the face of accepted wisdom about, among other things, appreciation, return on investment, blah, 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 blah. The thing of it is, I bought an M the first time, and I'm about to buy an M now because of how I shoot, what my post-capture workflow is, and my view that I do not buy a Leica M digital body as an investment, but instead a tool, a talisman, and a companion. With that out of the way, we can begin, I think, by dismissing the world's first digital M-mount rangefinder, the 6-megapixel APS-C Epson RD1 introduced in 2004. It was a milestone. It was introduced years ahead of Leica's M8, and it was clever, interesting, and pretty in its own way. But from a practical perspective, including price, forget about it. I, for one, have moved on. As soon as we do that, there are no other true digital rangefinders of which I'm aware, other than M's. If you know of others, let me know in the comments. We are thus left with film M compatibles, although once again, as I said in part 1, I personally believe that the advantages of digital workflow outweigh the lower price at which you can often buy film M's or compatible film bodies. Still, if you want to explore the realm of M-mount compatible true rangefinder film cameras, that pretty much leaves us with Voigtlander Besses, the R2s, 3s, and 4s, and Zeiss Icon ZMs, not the SW, neither of which I've had in hand. So I'd really be interested in hearing from those of you who have owned them and Leica Film M's and can compare them and share them with us in the comments. It does have to be said that the Besses and the ZM in particular are very clean designs and more modern than comparable M's, although for the same money, say $1,800 to $2,800 for ZM, as much as $500 less for one of the Bessa models I just mentioned, you can find an original Leica M3 or M4 variant, if not an M6, or more appropriately actually, the M7 at which the ZM was most directly aimed because both of them offer aperture priority auto exposure. If I had to choose a film M or M compatible, I'd go M4P, but as you know, that's just me. The Besses and Icons do not have the same build quality or silky shutters as Leicas, I've read. Both companies have long been out of the camera body business, and I am not aware of a vibrant third-party repair industry for them either. But I would say this: if one falls into your lap, keep it and buy glass for it before you decide to upgrade to Leicas, if it works. That's it, really. In the end, I've recommended just 3 lenses from Voigtlander and 1 from TT Artisan. I've suggested you look at 3 or 4 lenses from Zeiss, another one from Voigtlander, and have intimated that there may be other staggeringly cheap but surprisingly performant options from TT Artisan, perhaps from 7 Artisan. On the camera body side, I've asserted there are slim to no pickings. Leica has stayed the rangefinder course the way no one else has, and I would recommend you limit yourself to exploring only Leica M mount bodies. Then again, I think there are even better ways to have one's cake and eat it too, which is to say, if you can stretch the boundaries of your search, if you give yourself permission to reconceptualize how you define the Leica M experience, your options and ultimately the image quality available to you grow dramatically. Hold that thought for our part 3 of the special Leica edition of our Budget Gourmet series, which is all about, as I said at the beginning, thinking differently. A big shout out to KEH for sponsoring this video, a great resource for finding just this kind of gear. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount or bonus code in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below, because this is an incredible audience. If you'd like a copy of our Streets of New York, the book, head over to www.3bmep.com/books. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one video session with me for a portfolio review, explore or hone your artistic voice, select gear, and more, sign up at www.3bmep.com/booking. Finally, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, picking up some official 3 Blind Men and an Elephant swag at 3bmep.threadless.com, sending coffee money via PayPal, or best of all, join us as a patron over at Patreon. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.